All right, I think we are on live. Yes. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to ACFO's very first webinar. We're doing this because we know a lot of you are teleworking from home. You have a lot of questions, so we're happy to answer some of those. So my name is Danny Richard. I'm the president for ACFO. I'm joined here today by Scott Chamberlain. Actually, you maybe pan over to Scott so we can introduce Scott. Say hello, Scott.
Morning, everybody. Happy to be here and answer some of your questions today.
So Scott with ACFO, he's our Director of Labor Relations. He's our negotiator. He's also our General Counsel. He's been with ACFO for about since 2004, I think, Scott. So I'm very happy to have him on the phone. More importantly, you know, he's our resident expert. So the questions you might have, I might not have the answers for them because I'm a member just like you guys, but I'm sure Scott can either answer them or really get back to you to respond with the answer by looking it up. What we're trying to do here today, my friends, is really go through your questions. And the way we'll be doing this is using Slido. Slido is a preferred means of communication with members because we realize it's simple. You can ask your questions anonymously. And more importantly, you guys can vote up which questions are most relevant so we can actually start answering those questions that are more popular. I'm looking at it right now. We have 21 questions that have been posted. So the way you can submit your question online is very simple. Is the code's on the screen now. You go to slido.com and you put in the code for this event, which is ACFO-ACAF. I've also written here next to me the code. So this is really the way that if you have questions, you can submit online right now. But at any point, if you have any questions, even after the webinar, please feel free to send us an email at our labor relations inbox. All right, let's get right into it. I can tell you this COVID-19 has been really unique, unforeseen teams right now. And I see it's very difficult for everyone. I suspect at this point, the most of you are teleworking, as you should be. ACFO's implication with senior leaders on this has been every single day, because I'm sure you've seen when this first started 2 weeks ago, every single hour it was changing. I would tell you in the beginning, the employer was hesitant to pull the trigger to make sure everyone stays home and teleworks. But now, 2 weeks later, it's really they're encouraging everyone to telework. We've noticed also that not every department is dealing with this in the same way. Some departments have initiated their business continuity plan, others haven't. Some of them are asking their employees to rotate. So seeing how there's all this uncertainty and commotion, we directly went with the highest instance, which is the Office of the Chief Human Resources Officer. We found that by them at TBS issuing these guidelines and policies really allows other departments to make those decisions. And I realize not all of you have received their emails and communication. That's why on our website at ACFO, we're trying to post that information as soon as we receive it. So you've noticed we've posted things at night, during the weekends, because we know you guys have a lot of questions. So where do we stand right now? As of today, the majority of you should be teleworking. And I say this because the rule right now to be working from home is if you are critical and you can telework, you should telework. So some people were thought that, well, because I'm critical, I need to report to work. That's not true. If you're critical, but you can telework, you should telework. If you're not sure if you're critical or not, I wish I could give you an exact definition. I'll read the one from OCRO in a second. I will tell you this. Only, I would say at most 100 of our members, at ACFO we have about 5,000 members, maybe approximately 100 of those I believe would be critical. It's important not to confuse critical with essential. Essential is a term that's used when we're talking about collective bargaining and we talk about possibility of a strike. Some of you might be deemed essential, but that doesn't mean you're critical. I'm going to read you right now the definition that was provided by OCRO, the Chief Human Resource Officer. It reads as such: a critical service is one that is, if disrupted, would result in a high or very high degree of injury to the health, safety, security, or economic well-being of Canadians. In a nutshell, what it means is something really bad will happen if you don't report to work. And for the majority of our members in ACFO, they do important work, but it is not critical. So I'll give an example. If you guys don't book your PYEs, no one's going to die. And I use an example loosely here. What I'm saying is what we're doing is important, but very few of you will be deemed as critical. If your manager is saying you are performing critical work and for you it doesn't pass the smell test and you're not too sure, please ask your manager to send to you in writing why is it that you're deemed critical, and tell them that your union has requested it in writing, because I will tell you some of the reasons we've seen so far, they're not critical. Some of the employees are being told, well, let's just put you on the critical list so we can ensure that you come into work. Well, that's not the definition of critical. So we want to make sure that if you don't think it's critical, please communicate with us. ACFO services to members has basically been uninterrupted. A few years ago, we invested to ensure that if something were to happen, we could still serve our members. So today, I'm speaking to you from my home in Gatineau, and all of our labor relations officers, advisors, Scots from home, basically all the ACFO staff have access to their normal tools so that their services to you are uninterrupted. So say you are not critical. That doesn't mean you don't go to work and you're off here. You are still requested to telework if you can. So if you have the tools to telework, please do so. The challenge you might run into is you don't have access to the network, because the network right now for most departments is being reserved for workers that are deemed critical. So you do as much work as you can offline. Now, what do you do if, for example, your kids are at home because either they can't go to daycare, the schools are closed? Obviously, that's going to have an impact on your productivity. The employer acknowledges this, and that's why now we're using the leave, the other paid leave, the code 699. And although the employer has not clearly defined how and when you can qualify for this, one of the things we wanted to make clear is that we are aware that many of you that are working from home will have distractions. Is that normal? So you won't be necessarily able to perform your 7.5 hours. So what's important in this situation is have that communication with your supervisor. If you say, you know what, I had to take more than usual breaks and I was only able to perform, 5.5 hours, be transparent. And if you're getting pushback from management or your supervisor, please let us know so we can try to find a middle ground here. The situation that we're in right now, I don't think any of us have been in this situation before. So the policies that we normally have in place don't necessarily apply right now. So we're being understanding on both ends, both on the union side and the employer side. So you try to telework. Now, say you don't have the equipment to telework. Say you're saying, I could telework, but I don't have access to a laptop, or the fact that I can't access the network, there's not much I can do. Well, you might qualify again for the other paid leave, that code 699. So that communication that you have with your manager on a regular basis, it's important to try to find a way to be productive. But if you're unable to perform your duties, we want you to know that you won't need to use your sick days. You won't need to use your vacation days. The government, we made this very clear with them that we don't want people to be penalized when they're self-isolating, because otherwise what would happen is people that would normally stay home, if they're not paid, if they're off, they would automatically go to work. And we want everyone to stay home unless it is absolutely necessary. I'm going to go to the questions shortly because I see more and more coming in. I just want to pick up on a couple of things. Year-end deadline. So I've personally spoken with Occupé, the Controller General. He has confirmed to me that for now, the year-end deadlines have been pushed by 3 weeks. They will most likely need to be extended even more. So if any of you are at home right now because you're panicking, saying, oh my God, I've got all this workload and I won't be able to meet my deadlines, the government is aware. There's no one that's going to be penalized on your performance assessment because you didn't respect your deadline. That's simply not going to happen. Speaking of performance assessments, same thing. The deadlines there will need to be pushed later. Going back to the year-end deadlines, one thing was made clear, though, is for March 31st, although the Controller General is able to extend the publication of our financial statements for the Government of Canada, what he cannot change is GAAP, right? The accounting rules stay the same, which means if a good or service was not received by March 31st because of COVID-19, and that trickles into the new year, well, the accounting, we can't change that. So for now, I know a lot of you are worried because year-end is very busy time for our members, but no one's going to be penalized at the end of the day because this is nothing critical. Financial statements are important, but they're not critical. I mentioned a vacation. So if any of you had some planned vacation in the upcoming weeks, obviously you probably won't be able to take them. So you should be able to cancel them. If your employer is refusing to cancel your vacation, please let us know. If you have extra incurred costs, so for example, if you have special chair at the office, ergonomic mouse, and you're saying, well, I'm teleworking. I normally telework once a day and I can handle that. But now if I'm teleworking 5 days a week, I would need to have an ergonomic chair. The employer is looking into that right now, so there's no official policy on this one. But if you are incurring costs, extra costs that you normally would not have, although the employer hasn't given their policy right now, I would recommend you speak with your managers to, again, discuss this. For example, if you need to, I don't know, increase your data plan because you're using a lot of data right now because you're working off the network. I also want to talk about mental health. So because these are challenging times and everyone is confounded to their homes, it's very challenging because it's a complete change in our routine, right? So what the government of Canada, again, we've posted this on our website, they've changed certain rules of the public service healthcare plan, which is on our website right now. One of those changes is removing the requirement to get a prescription from a physician to access mental health. So it's easier for people now to actually discuss, because we probably will need to have more employee assistance program, more discussions with professionals in the public sector. So this is something the employer is aware of, and that's why they've made some changes to the public service healthcare plan, which is available on our website. I also want to touch on slightly on the spring tune-up. We've received a lot of questions about that, knowing the spring tune-up was scheduled for June 9th and 10th, or is still a go. We're doing the prudent thing here, which is to postpone the spring tune-up. So right now, the spring tune-up has been postponed to October 27th and 28th. As you recall, this year we're holding 2 days. The first one is free, and the other one we're doing it as cost recovery. So if you've signed up for the spring tune-up, you're automatically transferred. And if for some reason those dates don't work for you, you can cancel at any time. And if you paid for the second day, that will be refunded to you. So spring tune-up has been postponed to October 27th and 28th. Before I turn it over to Scott to start answering some questions, I do want to say this, that these are very difficult times, but there is opportunity here. And I know people are unsure what to do. It's difficult, but this is also an opportunity for us to show our worth as public servants, to show that we care about what we do, and we're trying to maximize the opportunities here so that we can play our part to make a difference. And I think some of you will be able to shine in this situation. So Scott, I'll turn it over to you to look on Slido. And again, for Slido, if you need questions, you see that on your screen right now, how to ask questions. Maybe we can start with the most popular question. Scott, over to you.
Thanks, Danny. We have 34 questions on Slido right now. We've got lots of time though, so we'll do our best to answer them.
I can't hear you.
No, I'm not on mute now.
Yeah, keep going, Scott. Keep going, Scott. We can hear you fine.
Okay. All right. So as my kids are, first question is, as my kids are home with me, do I have the right to ask for reduced hours of work? Finding it hard to balance both. Yeah, absolutely. The fact that you are able to telework and contribute during this time is great. But if you have a family situation that requires accommodation, just like you would pre-COVID, you can certainly request to have reduced hours to accommodate your family status. So if that means you can work for 5 hours a day, but for 2.5 hours a day you need to take care of your children, then that's a reasonable request. The employer is going to ask you if you have a spouse, if you've tried to make other arrangements, and those are legitimate questions that they're allowed to ask, but that's certainly something that you can request. Our second question is, there is talk of using code 699 when you're unable to work due to COVID-19. What are the qualifying parameters for this leave? Danny's covered this a little bit. Code 699, however, just generally is meant in this circumstance to provide for paid for those folks who are A, not critical and not going to work, B, able to telework but unable to do that because of technological restrictions, either access to the network or not having any equipment, or someone who's taking care of their family members. So the parameters are fairly loose. It's management leave. It's designed precisely for these circumstances. And if you have any questions about the particulars of your case, labor relations, we're all working, and you can email us. Third question, are we obligated to install used tools such as government Skype or personal devices and work on them? So this is a complicated question. You're not obligated to use your personal laptop, your PC at home. However, if that's something you've done prior to COVID, probably you should continue to do that. So for example, if you were accessing the network teleworking using your own laptop or your own internet, then you should continue to do so. If this is an issue for you in particular, I encourage you to contact Labor Relations so that we can look at the particulars of your case. But generally, you're not required to use your own equipment unless you've been doing that already prior to COVID. That being said, if you're willing to do that, we'd certainly encourage you to do as much as you can to accommodate what is extraordinary circumstances.
Scott, sorry to interrupt.
Go ahead.
I just want to mention, si vous avez des questions en français, on fait le webinaire en anglais, but si vous avez des questions en français, sentez-vous à l'aise d'aller sur Slido, d'écrire en français. Also, just want to point out, we're going to be broadcasting this. We're going to be posting this webcast on our website as well. So if you want to share this with your coworker, if you find this useful to you, you can share the link afterwards. Sorry, Scott, don't even interrupt there. You can continue on.
Not at all. Our next question is, if requested to attend the workplace by my manager, do I have the right to refuse to report? What could the repercussions be? Okay, so if you fear for your physical safety or your life, you can refuse to report to work. It's under the Canada Labor Code. So, given the circumstance, let's say a diagnosed who's just recently been in the building you're looking to report to, or the office you're report to, and you know there's been no cleaning, that might be a reasonable time to refuse to work. But I can't stress this enough. If you're going to refuse to report to work for those reasons, you need to reach out to Labor Relations immediately. We're here 24/7, and we'll try and get back to you as soon as possible. We've had cases where someone's being asked to return to work the next day. And we've been able to be involved in those cases and talk to management and sometimes OCRO and get decisions reversed. If you're really, if you think your physical well-being or your safety is at risk, there's provisions to refuse to work. But call us first. Ask to follow your side on these. Do you have advice for people with anxiety and mental health issues? Is there special leave can we can take if it gets bad, or do we have to take sick leave? If you're, that includes mental health issues. That's what sick leave is for, and you will be asked to take sick leave in most circumstances. Now, your manager may also be disposed to allowing you to take the 699 leave. So you could request one or the other, but if forced, if it's due to illness, whether that be COVID or something else, that's what sick leave is in place for. Again, these can get complicated and particular. Please do reach out to Labor Relations if you have a specific circumstance you need help with. Next question. If you're actually sick with COVID-19 symptoms but not actually tested, can you use code 699, or are we supposed to use regular sick leave? It's a similar question. If you're actually diagnosed or have the symptoms, if you have symptoms but are undiagnosed, it's most likely 699 leave. If you're diagnosed with COVID and sick for 2 weeks, it may fall to sick leave. Again, contact us if you're in this situation. Next question, manager requests that we work off-peak hours outside the normal work hours. Is this something we're obligated to do? So I'm going to just describe to everybody. This applies for both our CTEAV, former AU members, and our CT-FIN members, former FIs. Both collective agreements that apply provide for normal work hours in the hour of work provisions in your collective agreement. The only exception to the normal hours of work window, which is for former FIs, 7 a.m. to 6 p.m., is employee requested variations to that. So if your employer is asking you to work prior to 7 a.m., after 6 p.m., then the normal provisions of the collective agreement apply, dealing with overtime, callback pay, standby pay. Those all apply. OCRO's confirmed this. If you're willing to work outside the normal hours of work, you could agree to do this. You could agree to work a shift from 8 p.m. until 2 p.m. in the morning, or 2 a.m. in the morning. But that is something that cannot be unilaterally imposed by the employer. We have we're day workers in both cases. We don't have shift work provisions. And if they want to ask you to contribute outside those regular hours, and you don't agree to that, then the normal provisions of the collective agreement apply.
Scott, I'll maybe add something on top of that one.
Yeah.
I suspect that we will be seeing more departments potentially trying to extend those work hours, right? And again, you can do so on a voluntary basis, but I want to make clear to our members is you're willing and able to work. You want to help out, but if we're trying to go outside that 7 a.m. to 6 p.m. and it's not conducive for you, it's not something that really your setting, your home, your family, it doesn't work, please reach out to us. And I know some of you might be hesitant to contact a CFO because you might not want to get the union involved, but we just want to let you know what your rights are. And that's one of the things I perhaps want to put emphasis on is when you contact a CFO, we will never contact the employer unless you ask us to, right? But one of the services we offer is to make sure that we can make you aware of what your options are so that you're making an informed decision. And in this environment right now where there's really no policies on this, everyone's trying to do what they think is best. However, you still have rights even in these difficult times. So I'm happy to see that we have a lot of questions coming in on Slido right now. And Scott, perhaps I'll take this next one on budgets and I'll let you take the other ones. One of the questions on Slido is, are there a risk of budget cuts in the future? Which is a good question, and there may be, right? I will tell you, this is something I've spoken to a few CFOs where I suspect that, as you know, in P12 in March, that's where a lot of the departments will spend, maybe 15, 20% of their budget. But now because everyone is teleworking, because delivery is not happening, we might have some of their expenditures that were supposed to happen in P12 that are going to happen in P1. And accounting wise, it's just going to be in the next fiscal year. So I suspect there's going to need to have some budget rollovers. Now, will that happen? Your guess is as good as mine. But again, this will not be, employees will not be blamed for this. These are the circumstances in which we are in. And if budgets needs to be adjusted, it's something that needs to happen. If it doesn't, then we can address this later on. Scott, over to you for the next questions.
Yeah, sure. I would just add to that last question, Danny, that we realize over the years there will be budget cuts in the future, right? I mean, this is a cycle, and you can expect that before we get into workforce adjustment situations or anything of that nature, they would be looking at attrition through retirement. They would be looking at terms and that sort of thing. We've gotten no word of any positions being at risk now. We don't expect that's the case. But governments change, and at some point we'll go through a phase of budget cuts again. That's certainly gonna happen, but that's nothing to be worried about in the short term from the people we've been talking to. So there's a question, since there's a requirement to work from home, can we ask for reimbursable expenses? Is there a mechanism for this? For an example, internet bills. So again, if you're using your internet prior to COVID-19, answering questions at night on your phone or your laptop, the answer is only if you can show, and you would have to call labor relations and get us involved, an increase to your bill directly related to COVID-19 and being asked to telework from home. So we couldn't submit your normal internet bill month to month just because you're using it for COVID-19 teleworking. In fact, recently, I think most of the internet providers have removed the caps, for example. Now, if you're someone that didn't have internet, asked to work from home, got internet for that purpose, that may be a different situation. So I think that might be reasonable. But again, this is sort of a complicated question. One, I would ask you to refer to labor relations if you're seeking to get reimbursement. Next question has to do with privacy. member asks, my phone number was provided to manager for emergency updates. The manager is using the phone number for work-related issues. Is there something that can be done? First off, I would say that the entire period of COVID-19 self-isolation, working from home, probably considered an emergency. However, if you find that it's being overused, certainly it's your personal phone number, or if it's being shared with people you didn't ask for it, you didn't know it was going to be shared with, it's something reasonable that you could bring up with your manager in terms of reducing the use of it and not sharing it with somebody else. And again, if you have a privacy issue and you're not satisfied with management's response to that that conversation, then by all means, please contact Labor Relations at ACFO-ACAF.com. Next question is, once we receive instruction to return to work in the future, will we be able to request work from home as a precaution for a limited time period? This will be case specific. I'll give you an example. If someone has a child at home who's immunocompromised like myself, that would be a reasonable accommodation request. What might be an acceptable time for the bulk of employees to return to work may not be for some members, and that may be a reasonable request. It may also be different from region to region, depending on what the curve looks like in each province and each region. So yeah, there is a possibility, depending on your personal circumstances, that you would be able to work from home longer than the bulk of public servants and members. Next question. If a family member is sick and isolated in a senior home leading to emotional stress, what is there that can be done? Well, there are forms, depending on the severity of the sickness. There are forms of compassionate care leave, which is an EI program which you could apply for, and there's leave permitted in our collective agreement for those circumstances. If we're referring to sort of the mental stress that you're experiencing in providing that care or not being able to provide that care in some cases, when senior homes are in lockdown, that's a medical issue and you're entitled to use sick leave if you're unable to work because of that stress. And again, personal circumstances vary, and that's a good one to check in with LR on. Next question is, will some of us lose our jobs? Will there be position cuts? How will ACFO protect our rights if this happens? Those of you that were in the public service during DRAP will be familiar with the workforce adjustment program. It's an NJC agreement that is part of our collective agreement. There is a vast amount of protections in the case of layoffs in the federal public service, and incentives for those who wish to leave during times like that to leave. As we mentioned earlier, at this point, there's no talk of layoffs. As soon as ACFO gets any information of that sort from departments, we will share it with members, although we're not expecting it at this time.
Scott, I'll just add to that one. You know, I suspect no one knows how long this isolation will last, right? Weeks, months. Again, your guess is as good as mine. I will say this: once it does end, department's business continuity plan were never equipped to handle this length of a crisis, right? It's normally set up for, I don't know, there's a big snowstorm or there's an earthquake, a couple of days, maybe a week at most. The services that are non-critical, they are important, and if you do not do them for a while, they might become critical. So I suspect what will happen for our members, when you work in a financial field, when things start coming back to normal, we're going to have to catch up on all that work that was not done. So not only am I not concerned about our members losing their job, because we provide work that is useful. And we're going to have a spike when we come back to get that work done, because there's going to be a lot of work that needs to be done. So I suspect we might see the opposite, where we realize that the work performed by our members really adds value, and it wasn't done for a few weeks and a few months, and look how everything crumbled. So I want to reassure everyone not to worry about your jobs. That's something we have a very strong case to show that we bring value. So Scott, back to you there.
Thanks, Danny. Our next question is, will the union give direction to the departments on when FIs are to return to the office? Will it be consistent across all departments? In fact, when it's time to return to the office, it's ACFO won't be giving direction. It'll be OCRO, the Office of the Chief Human Resource Officer, giving directions to departments. As to whether it will be consistent across departments, I would predict there will be a period of a few weeks for this message to trickle down. If anything, the last 2 weeks have been punctuated by confusion in departments getting the message and communicating the message from OCRO. Hopefully, this will be clearer when it's time, but there'll be some inconsistency across departments, and that's what we're here for, is to communicate as we did when people were being sent home. Next question is, are work from home logs with description of work completed required? Manager provided a template the day the team was sent to work from home. The answer is management can request work from home logs. That is within management rights. If the situation is such that they're looking for an unreasonable amount of information, that's something you can raise with LR for us to talk to management about. But yes, the management can request a log of that nature be filled out.
And maybe, Scott, we can add to that. If you're a team of 5 people and you're the only one that's being asked to fill out a log, well, you have a good case here. So again, as Scott just pointed out, although the employer has the right, if you were teleworking before and you didn't have to provide a log, I would question that, right? So if you're asked to provide a log and if it's already been the case, definitely contact us. I'm not saying the employer doesn't have the right, but it's not because you have the right that it's something that should be done, right? Especially if you're the only one being asked for a log and no one else does. So definitely contact us if that's the case. I don't see many of our members having to provide a log. Scott,
well, so there's a different circumstance. I'm gonna talk to you like let's compare it to sick leave notes. If the employer has evidence of past abuse of sick leave notes, which is very rare, they can actually ask one employee for sick leave notes and not other employees. So if there's been an issue about how much work's being done, if there's been performance documentation, which happens in some cases, you may be asked to do a log when other employees are not. And in that case, you need to contact us again because you need us on your side in those circumstances. So well, it's a good general rule that all employees should have to do these logs. There may be cases where you're singled out, and in those cases, do contact us. Next question is, will offices be fully cleaned prior to people returning to work to ensure employee safety? This is a topic that we revisit frequently on the OCRO calls. Certainly, offices should be fully cleaned and disinfected prior to people entering the workplace. There have been incidents where this has not happened, and if you're worried about this is something you should raise with us so we can raise with the department. No one should be put in a position of having to return to an office and worrying about whether it's been disinfected. Next question, how is ACFO-ACAF positioning itself to protect against salary or benefit rollbacks? Well, absent some form of legislation, excuse me, absent some form of, this is teleworking. I have someone come to the door and have the phone ringing at the same time. One of my 4 kids will get the phone. Well, we're positioning ourselves by having a signed collective agreement. In fact, we have a collective agreement that doesn't expire for a number of years. The employer simply can't roll back salary or benefits unless they pass legislation through Parliament to do that. That's unlikely in a minority Parliament, and certainly our ears to the ground on anything of the sort, and we'll be working diligently, like we always do at the bargaining table, to make sure that doesn't happen. Of course, collective bargaining is 3 years out, and as this develops, we'll be looking for improvements, not rollbacks as we usually do. What are the risks of reduction of the workforce a year from now? Again, this has sort of been covered. depending on which government is in power and what their priorities are in terms of deficits and budgets, it's likely we're going to see a workforce adjustment in the future at some time. It's very difficult to predict whether this will lead to a workforce reduction. But again, early signals of that, which we'll have our eyes on, will be attrition, like moves towards not rehiring. The first sign of anything of that sort will be a reduction in staffing once the workplace staffing actions, once the workforce is back at the office. Next question. Can leave code 699 be used for temporary inability to work due to mental, physiological impacts of the pandemic situation? It's been answered earlier again, but I'll just repeat it. If you actually have a mental illness or a physical illness, that's what sick leave provisions change because we have COVID-19. So medical stress leading to you not being able to work or having to work in a reduced fashion would normally fall to sick leave, and if it's extended to long-term disability insurance. I'm just reading a few of the questions here because a lot of them are relating to 699. I think we've covered that.
Scott, I'll give you a chance to read through some of those questions.
Yeah.
I want to emphasize on this one. So one of the reasons we're holding this webinar right now is we've had this idea of holding webinars in the past, but because many of you are obviously using your employer's network because you're at work, the firewalls are preventing us from holding the webinars. But seeing the amount of questions we're going right now, I suspect we're going to have more of these in the future during COVID-19. But also when we go back to regular pattern, I think it would be an opportunity for us to really try to find a way to hold these. But it is challenging because, for example, I know some people right now are trying to access from their network at a D&D, it didn't work. So we're hoping the fact you're at home, you can use your own home network that allows you in. But seeing how the questions keep coming here, I think for the future, we'll definitely host another one of these. And for anyone that wasn't able to attend, it will be posted on our website as well. Scott, back to you for the questions.
Yeah, I will answer just one more leave question on 699, which should answer a lot of the questions in the queue. 699 isn't a new leave. This is a leave in our collective agreement to deal with emergency situations. Prior to COVID-19, this was, when the flood happened or there was a blizzard and you couldn't report to work. This would be the sort of catch-all leave. And right now it's being used by the government to fill the gaps in the collective agreement that isn't designed to deal with the pandemic, quite honestly. So just as a general rule, if there's another form of leave that applies, that's the leave that applies. So if it is truly sick leave, that's the leave that applies. And if you're out of sick leave, the normal rules apply. You would fall to EI and then to long-term disability. And then hopefully if you had to attend court, it's court leave that applies. If you have to care for your family in a way that's not related to COVID, family leave would apply. So I'm hoping that answers a number of the questions on 699 leave. And again, there's no harm in asking LR to answer a particular question on 699 leave if you have it. And I know it's confusing. We're in non-typical days, and it's doubly confusing because managers don't, quite frankly, understand it in many cases as well. Your labor relations advisors, the group at ACFO, is much better positioned to answer how that applies than a lot of managers on the ground. So do contact us if you have questions. I have a question here about, we've heard the government will be implementing shift work due to overloaded networks. Is this true? We covered this earlier. There may be departments asking voluntarily for members to identify themselves who are interested in working shift work outside the normal work hours. That may occur, but the rules of the collective agreement continue to apply. We have normal hours of work for FIs and AUs, and those continue to apply. No one can force you to work outside those normal hours of work without compensating you, as the collective agreement provides, through overtime, callback pay, or standby pay.
Scott, I see we have a lot of questions on work hours. So, Scott just mentioned it. We have our regular work hours. If you're being asked to work outside the regular work hours, which is 7 a.m. to 6 p.m., if you're being asked to work outside that and that's not convenient for you, please contact us. That's the easiest way to go about it. I'll take the next one, Scott, on spring tune-up and maybe online training. As I just mentioned, the spring tune-up will be postponed to October 27th and 28th. It is available online as well, so we will be webcasting it. But to add to that, because a lot of you are teleworking and you can't access the network, you might be able to access some online training. And maybe this is an opportunity to, we had a big data analytics conference a few months ago. It's a good opportunity to brush up on some new skills. As I was saying before, there's opportunities here. So if you're saying to your boss, hey, I know my learning plan is not approved yet, but certain of these trainings are free or inexpensive, they might be willing to approve them virtually so that you can actually start maybe building a new skill set, because I suspect, if I have to guess, friends, we're going to be at least 3 to 4 weeks in this state right now. So if you can't access the network, I would recommend you find other ways to get busy, and online training is maybe an option we have. And even at ACFO, we had, through the Controllership Training Center, we're working potentially on delivering an ethics course, because I know for those of you that are CPAs are requiring 4 hours on ethics now. So we're working on a course that, I don't know if we're going to do it in time here, but maybe down the road in a couple of months that we can deliver to you guys to meet your requirements that you have. Scott, back to you.
Sure. Just one more detail on hours, which I think maybe bears repeating. While you can't be forced to work your normal hours of work outside the normal hours of work window, you can be asked to do overtime. You can be asked to do standby. You can be asked on a callback, but you need to be compensated for those things. What they can't do is say you work your 7.5 hours. You're going to start at 6 p.m. and you're going to work 7.5 hours after that, and we're going to pay your regular pay. That can't happen. You're going to get overtime. You're going to get standby or callback, as the case may be. And again, your particular circumstances, raise them with us, and we'll be more particular with our answers. However, even if they can't ask you to work 7.5 hours overtime, the next question here, if you're working all day, looking after your kids, you're a single parent at home, you have kids that aren't in school, and you're with them from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m., it's not reasonable for them to ask you to then work overtime from 6 p.m. for another 8 hours. And in those circumstances, they need to accommodate your family status. There's a question here, will ACFO set up an interdepartmental rapid deployment team to move employees to departments requiring surge capacity? That's something that the employer has not approached us regarding. It wouldn't be ACFO setting up that. That would be something that management would have to set up, and they would have to ask for members to do this on a voluntary basis. So I've heard nothing in terms of anything regarding this. Danny, I don't know if you have as well.
Yeah, I'll add to that one. You see, here's why I love our members. See, this is a great idea, right? What I think what the member is saying here is there's certain demands on our members in certain departments while others might not. And I know I was chatting with Ian Boyle. He's on our board of directors and he's on global affairs, and global affairs, as you can imagine, there's a lot of Canadians that are in different countries. So there's a surge in their requests, and perhaps there's more demand. One of the things I'm sure you all know is that departments are very bad at communicating between themselves, right? So everything is siloed. That makes it challenging, and I wish they were to do this. It's challenging because it's every government department is operated basically as its own entity. I like this idea. How to actually make it happen is difficult because, again, as Scott mentioned, this is something that is initiated on the employer side. One of the things we did, for example, is a lot of FIs want to change departments when they're looking for jobs. So even before COVID-19, if you're an FI, for example, and you're working at the Public Service Commission and you'd like to have experience on a bigger department, there's no mechanism by which right now you can actually move departments, right? And I think what the member is saying here is, well, there's maybe an opportunity to use the skill set that we have into another department, but there's no mechanism right now. It's certainly something we'd be willing to look into, but I think everyone right now is such in a critical state. They're not there yet, but it's a good idea. I'm more than happy to put it forward. But again, unless the employer actually buys into this, we're kind of handcuffed on that one. Scott, back to you.
Thanks, Danny. Next question is, our department says that we are supposed to telework till April 10th. What is the likelihood that the telework period will extend? I think it's pretty clear that it's likely that this telework situation is going to extend till the end of April. I'm not hearing that from anybody, but if you look at the numbers, the COVID numbers, they've doubled over the weekend. The deaths have doubled over the weekend. I think it's highly unlikely that, given the people who are making these decisions and what we know about them, that telework is not going to extend beyond April 10th at this rate. We're still climbing in terms of cases, and that doesn't bode well for this being over by April 10th. There's a question here about ACFO dues. It's not a COVID question, but just wondering if ACF dues deduction amount will increase. It's still set to increase as approved at the AGM. Jenny, I'm not sure, is that April that's coming in, or yeah?
It's April 1st. So thanks for the question here. It's not COVID related, but it is relevant to the membership. So for those of you that weren't there at our AGM, so at our annual general membership meeting we had in November, we showed to members that since 2011, the ACFO dues, your union dues, had not increased since 2011. A member proposed a dues increase that was revised by the Finance Committee, revised by the board, was put forward to a vote to the membership. So this dues increase, which takes in effect April 1st, in 2 days, will see your monthly union dues going from $50 a month to $62 a month. So effectively on your paycheck is $6 difference every paycheck. It's still tax deductible, obviously. I received a confirmation from PSPC a few weeks ago that everything had been set in place, because as you can imagine with Phoenix, to set this change in motion, it requires a lot of work prior to the actual due date itself of April 1st. I've confirmed this recently. They've all said, look, the wheels are in motion and everything should be ready to go. But as you can imagine, as we've heard with Phoenix in the past, when they say, yeah, good to go, it doesn't always mean that way. So if you notice any errors in your dues deduction, please let us know. I'm more than happy to look into that with you guys.
Thanks, Danny. There's a question here on the Canada School of the Public Service having turned off the learning portal. Maybe Danny, you're in a better position to talk about the opportunities we have through the PD programs that ACFO runs.
Yeah, we've this is unfortunate. I know a lot of the Canada School training is now online, but because everyone is on critical, I can see why they've turned it out. Through the Controllership Training Center, a lot of our training was focused on in-person, because a lot of the training we do for our members is the soft skills, because that's where we see the biggest area of improvement. We'll see if we can put together something that's online, could be a webinar such as this one. But I want to use this opportunity to inform you that the Joint Career Development Program, the $1 million training fund that we have for our members, we still plan on launching that at the end of April. I think it's April 29th is the date we're aiming for right now. So we're going to be offering to all of our members, again, a wide range of training, which doesn't really make a difference in the short term because most of the training starts in the fall. But I want to encourage you to apply for this training because, first of all, it's free. It's very relevant. It's a great opportunity for you guys to network. So at the end of April, if you're still teleworking, make sure you apply for this training because it's easy to apply as well. But we normally have about 1,000 of our members apply, but we have a total of 5,000 members. And the offerings will be similar to what we had last year. So you're going to have some courses on communications, leadership skills. We still have that course with Kevin Page and his team at the Institute of Fiscal Study and Democracy. We also have the FI interchanges. So we take you from Ottawa, we send you to a region, and for the people in the regions, we take you from the regions, we bring you to Ottawa. And again, this is all free, everything is covered. So look for that call letter coming out at the end of April, unless something happens and we have to postpone it. Scott?
Yeah, a couple questions. Someone's asking if there's going to be more of these webinars. I think that's probably likely that we'll do more of these webinars. When will sort of be determined by when we think there's been enough developments to warrant another webinar, but I would think fairly soon we'll be doing another one. Another question is regarding overtime. The question is, how does OT work if an employee does half their 7.5-hour day as 699, or do they get OT, even if they didn't really work a full day? So just so we're clear, if you're on leave 699 for 7.5 hours and you're asked to do an hour of overtime at 9 p.m., you've worked a full day. The fact that you're on leave, paid leave, doesn't mean you haven't worked that day. And if you're being called after the fact, you're still entitled to OT. Just because you're on a form of leave doesn't mean they don't have to pay OT if they call you later, or call back pay or standby pay. Hope that's clear.
Scott, there's a question in French here. I'd like to take this one. Basically, the member is asking if we're asked to perform duties that are non-related to your work, should you do that? Donc, la question est bonne. Est-ce que l'employeur peut exiger que nous faisons des tâches non reliées au travail habituel? Ça me fait penser un peu quand il y a une grève. Et des fois, par exemple, s'il y a une grève potentielle là, de l'Alliance de la fonction publique et une grève, puis on vous demande de faire des tâches reliées à des tâches de AS ou de CR. Vous avez typiquement une description de tâches et l'employeur peut vous demander de changer vos tâches. Il n'y a pas de problème tant que ça reste dans votre domaine d'expertise, dans la raison pour laquelle on vous a engagé. Donc, si par exemple, on vous demande de devenir un technicien en informatique parce qu'il n'y en a pas assez, s'il vous plaît, communiquez avec nous. Dans ce cas-ci, on mentionne un centre d'appel. Un centre d'appel, ouais, c'est tiré par les cheveux. Peut-être si c'est un centre d'appel sur les conseillers financiers ou quelque chose du genre, mais si vous n'êtes pas certain, appelez-nous. So just to recap that one in English, if you're asked to perform duties that are not related to yours, definitely ask us. And if it's a financial task, all our members are financial related. That's good. But if you're asking to be performing, for example, IT work that has nothing to do with your job description, definitely contact us at ACFO. Scott?
Yeah, I'm going to take a question from further down the list that's come up recently. Will there be clauses negotiated in the next collective agreement to deal with these types of situations? So 2 points on this. Yes, it's already on our list of things to negotiate next round. We keep a sort of running list. We think it's very a good idea to have provisions that come into place when a pandemic has been declared. So that's something we will bring to the table. It'll take two parties to come to an agreement on that, but I think the employer will have an interest in this as well. In addition to that, we've already reached out to OCRO to suggest that that we'd be willing to talk about a good neighbor agreement, which is basically you can reopen a collective agreement anytime or agree on an MOU to cover off things that aren't dealt with in the collective agreement. So I mentioned earlier, collective agreement's not really meant to answer some of the questions that are being answered, and we're doing the best we can. But there may also be a side agreement at some point, depending on how long this takes, to govern this pandemic.
Scott, we've only got 5 minutes left, so I'll start maybe firing some quick answers here. So there's questions regarding second language evaluations and testing. We received an update on this one where the validity of the language tests have been extended. In terms of testing itself, that might need to be postponed. I could see how the school doesn't have the facilities right now or the people to actually perform the test itself. So yes, it might be postponed, but it's the most information I could give you right now. Training for the new year. So again, right now is when New Year happens, and right now is when you'd be making potentially your learning plans. In terms of the budget, so the question here was, the question just moved. Okay, well, the question was, will we have sufficient training budget for next year? Hard to answer that one, I suspect. Likely not. But again, if your training budget's being reduced, for example, if your manager approaches you this year and says, hey, by the way, we don't have any money for training this year because whatever cuts happen, please let us know. Yeah, every employee has the right to continuous learning to make sure their skills are improved or maintained. So any training that's not being performed, let us know. Scott, any quick question you see there you'd like to take?
Yeah, I mean, there's a few questions. I'll sort of collect them by saying they're talking about using this as a kind of opportunity to settle pay equity, that kind of thing. Or if I'm working telework now, does that mean I have a better case to work telework once things return to normal? I think it's fair to say that many of the things we were working on prior to COVID are on hold. So we haven't had a pay equity discussion since COVID started. I mean, we're still working on it, but many of the committee meetings we have working on Phoenix damages, we haven't met since COVID started. really, they're working at a full tear at Okro, trying to respond to this situation. And so many things we might otherwise be working on at this point in time or not. And on the return to work questions, generally we think in the LR community that this will result in a greater use of telework in the future, a greater recognition that it can work. Certainly there'll be more equipment in place in departments eventually to allow it to happen. So we think it will open up an opportunity for increased telework. And maybe those members who have it unreasonably denied now will be able to use it. But I think that's a question for another day. But I do just want to reiterate, if you don't have the equipment that you need to telework, don't suffer in pain, keep teleworking. You can request that equipment. If you need to look after your kids and you're trying to burn the candle at both ends, there's only so long you can do that. Your family status should be accommodated. And that's what LR is here for, is to help you out on those specific circumstances.
A question on here regarding staffing. So I suspect at this point, all potential staffing pools will most likely be postponed, which is unfortunate. But again, we are in critical times, right? So the employer right now is focusing on the essentials. I can see if right now you are in the process of being deployed, promoted, and they're doing reference checks, they'll most likely get pushed. If it's really causing you an issue where now they said, well, the pool was canceled or something like that, please let us know. But yes, I do suspect that staffing now will either be put on hold or postponed until the foreseeable future. There's a question in French here. Est-ce qu'il y aurait des changements dans les environnements de travail où les bureaux ne sont pas assignés en jeu à partager au bureau? That's a good question. So I'll just say it in English and then go in French. With this whole idea of activity-based workplace where no one has their own assigned desk, we might have this is a good indication that, well, this definitely helps to spread the germs, right? Obviously. So activity-based workplace has always been something that some people love it, some people hate it, but that does raise a question of, should we relook into this? Might be a bit too late for that now because they've already invested. Just to answer it in French, though, donc, la réponse à la question, c'est oui, ça devrait être plus de précaution au niveau peut-être de réévaluer la situation pour voir dans le futur si c'est vraiment apte, parce qu'on va certainement plus avoir de germes qui sont transmis quand il y a plusieurs personnes qui travaillent dans le même bureau, dans le même lieu de travail. Peut-être avoir plus au niveau des enjeux pour quand on nettoie les stations de travail, mais c'est une bonne question. C'est une bonne question. Scott, you see anything on there that we haven't responded yet?
Just on the interest of time, Danny, maybe some of these we can respond to after the fact, and or answer them at the next call. I should add, though, this is a fluid situation. Some of this may change, and that's when we'll have our next webinar. The government could, I talked about a side agreement, but the government could also legislate rules and put them in place. They haven't said they're going to do that, but it's a fluid situation, and answers change from week to week. Some of the answers we've given today may be different next week, and I think ACFO is committed to having these webinars as much as possible.
Yeah, good point, Scott. Thanks. So I see there's a few more questions there, but they might have tied into another answer. So we'll end it there for today, friends. I really thank you for joining us today. I hope this was useful for you. We'll definitely be doing another one of these as we have more information. But what I want to emphasize, at any point in time, if you have a question, you don't need to wait for one of these webinars, right? Our team is still fully operational. You can send us a question. You go to our website, hit contact us, and you'll see our labor relations inbox. And I can assure you, 90% of the time, you'll get a response the same day, or if not the day after. So we really want to make sure that services to members is what we're here to do. It's what we do best, and want to make sure there's no interruption in the services that we offer you. So on that, we'll end it here. Thank you for joining us, and we'll see you soon, and stay safe, friends. Bye.